In January of 2020, the United States reported their first confirmed case of COVID-19. On March 18, I tweeted out, "I turned 20 in a couple days, and my parents said they're getting me an entire pack of toilet paper for my birthday." Heart eye emoji, partying face emoji. On my birthday, March 27, Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina issued a statewide stay-at-home order that would go into effect in 3 days. So while I was stuck indoors, I spent a lot of time listening to music, and it felt like everyone was singing about the pandemic.
COVID-19 concerts up, no Coachella.
Pandemic fly on a runway in my hazmat, children running through the house in my art all black.
Would you be my little quarantine, or is this the way it ends?
Coronavirus, shit is real, shit is getting real, shit is real, coronavirus.
Undoubtedly, the artists of 2020 have used their music to express their lived experiences of the COVID-19 pandemic. While popular music shows the big picture of society's current attitudes, it also magnifies individuals as patients of a shared cultural pain. These types of stories are called disease narratives. Even though pandemics virtually affect everyone in the country, each artist tells their own specific version of a disease narrative. Frankly, disease narratives are not new to American pop culture. Before we start talking about disease, let's first set the stage in which American popular music originated. The first distinctively American genres of music were blackface minstrelsy and ragtime. Unlike the European-influenced classical music of the upper class, minstrelsy and ragtime were made for working-class Americans, those who could not traditionally play nor afford the entertainment of the rich. Minstrelsy was popularized by this man, Daddy Rice, who actually created this theatrical character based on a physically disabled African-American slave you probably know, Jim Crow. Now, instead of the streaming technology we use today like Apple Music and Spotify, Americans of Daddy Rice's era consumed music either through live performances or, for those who could afford to, sheet music. The turn of the 20th century marked the sheet music revolution, or the booming mass production of popular sheet music from approximately 1890 until around 1926, when sheet music was being outrun by radio and record players. This is Tin Pan Alley. It was an area in New York between Broadway and 6th Avenue where a hub of publishers mass-produced popular music at the turn of the 20th century. It was basically the Silicon Valley of ragtime and minstrelsy. Even though there were black songwriters in Tin Pan Alley like W.C. Handy and Gussie Davis, the main audience they targeted were white.
Various minorities in the United States had limited access to the world of publishing, to the world of recording, certainly in the early 20th century, and they were going to have limited access to performance spaces and performance audiences.
Therefore, as you can imagine, the different types of narratives represented in popular music today in the 21st century vary wildly from narratives from the 1890s. If you look at the sheet music covers of ragtime and minstrelsy, it's pretty hard to find a portrayal of black individuals that isn't a racial caricature. When it comes to looking for Asian, Latinx, or indigenous people, well, I wish you good luck. So, what kind of disease narratives were produced by Tin Pan Alley? The range of stories were mostly limited to diversity of social class instead of ethnicity. And then there are songs like "If I'm Going to Die, I'm Going to Have Some Fun," which talks about wealthier men and their interactions with healthcare providers. "If I'm Going to Die, I'm Going to Have Some Fun" is the 20th century version of YOLO.
I'm here for a good time, not a long time,
Around 1917, when the United States entered World War I, more than 1 million Black Americans moved to the South to urban cities in the North during the Great Migration. Mostly, African Americans were pocketed into third-rate housing that lacked clean water and received much of the city's wastewater, resulting in particularly virulent epidemics. In 1918, the Spanish flu pandemic hit the United States. It resulted in about 675,000 deaths in the nation, in comparison to the current 242,000 deaths from COVID-19. By the way, these numbers are still increasing as I'm editing this in November. The unsanitary living conditions caused Black city dwellers to die from tuberculosis and the flu at about twice the rates of white people between 1910 and 1935. It's interesting, yet unsurprising, that the stories of health and social inequities of the poor Black Americans never made it onto sheet music.
Of course, as you know, there were African Americans who were trying to navigate that world and do more, that is, publish songs that were a little bit more sophisticated or a little bit more complex in their representation, but they still had to navigate a world in which whites controlled it.
To simplify it, the music industry understood that quote-unquote American society of that time did not want these types of disease narratives to be popularized.
So the people who were deciding what African American music was published in sheet music and recorded onto whatever form of recording technology existed were white. So it was white ideas of what African American music would sell and to whom that dictated what was in the commercial marketplace.
But the representation of non-white individuals began to evolve in the early 1920s. Mainstream music companies like Columbia and Paramount started selling race records, which were phonograph records specifically targeted for the African American audience. Race records were cheap to produce and easy to sell. This helped commodify genres like blues, jazz, and gospel music. By the end of the sheet music revolution in 1926, the music industry started seeing the emergence of more authentic Black portrayals.
And it has to do with a notion that there's an audience for these recordings if we can find them. And so the record companies go looking for music that is popular.
Here we have the 1919 Influenza Blues by S.E. Ray Jenkins.
It was in 1919, yes, men and women was dying. With that stuff, which the doctors call the flu.
Now, I could trace the entire history of American popular music, but that would end up making this into an entire documentary series, so let's just skip to 2020. Fast forward to today, we have a wide range of disease narratives made by diverse artists for a diverse audience.
In the present day, we of course live in a very sophisticated musical marketplace with all sorts of marketing intended to identify audiences and to literally now stream music to those audiences. So there are genres and then there's subgenres. Many artists are less concerned in situating themselves and dominating a genre, and they're more interested in reaching audiences through the various platforms that they use.
Music technology has also advanced and is no longer gatekept by certain professionals.
You don't need a manager. You don't need a whole record company behind you. Eventually, you'll need people to help you distribute it. But the point being, access to recording is much easier than it was, much cheaper than it was.
The internet also offers a platform that allows artists to release music while they are simultaneously experiencing the pandemic.
Okay, I'm bored in the house and I'm in the house, bored. Bored in the house and I'm in the house, bored.
This is Curtis Roach, who went viral on TikTok and ended up getting an offer to collaborate with Tyga. This is Year of the Ox, a Korean-American rap duo who released a song back in March about anti-Asian xenophobia during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Think I'm dealing with racism worse because of the outbreak? No, we've been dealing with racism since birth with outbreaks. I still have faith in humankind, but what do I know? Hatred's the most contagious, and these days it's going viral. I hate it.
You should have been downtown. The people are rising. We thought it was a lockdown. They opened the fire. Them bullets was flying. Who said it was a lockdown? Goddamn lie. Oh my,
Rapper Anderson.Paak and his song Lockdown talks about his experience as an African American during stay-at-home lockdowns from the pandemic, but also because of civil protests that rose after George Floyd's murder.
Secret agents, they be planted in the crowd. Said it's civil unrest, but you sleep so sound like you don't hear the screams when we catching beat down. Staying quiet when they killing niggas, but you speak loud when we ride. Got opinions coming from a place of privilege. Sicker than the COVID, how they did them on the ground. Speaking of the COVID, is it still going around?
The narratives of marginalized groups existed even in the 1900s, but it wasn't always accepted in popular culture as it is today. The internet has flattened out the playing field, making music production, dissemination, and consumption more accessible to artists and listeners of various backgrounds. But the biggest takeaway is that increased representation and social awareness of race-specific issues often occur simultaneously. And without starting public conversation about specific disease narratives, medical and social intervention for these marginalized groups is less supported. I'll end this video with a part of Lupe Fiasco's song Streets on Fire, released in 2007.
Streets on fire tonight.
Disease, the virus is spreading in all directions. No safe zone, no cure, and no protection. No symptoms to find the signs of an infection. No vaccines, remedies, and no corrections. Quarantine your dreams and sell off our connections. Don't let them in, not a friend, not a reflection. Everybody's got it and want you to have it next then. Don't accept them if you want to stay as an exception. Appeal can heal the ill of this sickness. Some are still in doubt of its existence. Some call it forgiveness and some call it the vengeance. Some say it's an exit and some say it's an entrance. The poor say the rich have the cure. The rich say the poor are the source. Revolutionaries say a psychological war invented by the press just to have something to report. Some say the first case came from a maternity ward. Some say a morgue. Some say the skies. Some say the floors. Say the nuns. None say the hoods. And everybody is sure. The scientists say it only infects the mind. The little boy said it only infects the girls. The preacher man said it's gonna kill off the soul. A bum said it's gonna kill the whole vibe.